Recently, Joe Manchin was featured in a New York Times article, and that article is pretty awful. Um, and not necessarily because of who wrote it or anything like that, but because of what Manchin has said in this article. Now, in this, basically, Joe Manchin, he basically said that this was a golden opportunity to get his kind of bipartisanship. And that's kind of what it was about. So let me go through it, right? They write that with President-elect Joe Biden preparing to govern from the middle in a Congress whose thin majorities will force him to compromise on almost every priority, Mr. Manchin, a centrist, suddenly finds himself at the center of relevance in the nation's capital. So let me just stop right there and point out how Joe Manchin is definitely not a centrist. He's a conservative. He's basically a Republican in everything but name. Tell me one progressive thing that Joe Manchin has stood for. Oh, but he tried to pass gun control. You don't understand. Gun control is like what? Over 90% of Americans favor some form of gun control. And that's things like, common sense measures. Like, making sure that people get background checks before gun purchases, things like that. Very, very simple common sense things. Okay. So you can't really say, well, I'm a centrist because I believe in like gun control. Well, I guess if you compare it to the Republican Party, who doesn't believe in any gun control, in fact, they've wanted to allow blind people to be able to buy and own guns. And so I guess if you're looking at crazy town over on the right hand, the right wing, and you look at very moderate gun controls presented by the Democratic Party, certainly nothing that's super quote unquote lefty, which by the way, it doesn't even apply to being a left-right issue really, because there's a lot of leftists who are incredibly pro-gun. And so it's been turned into this ridiculous right-left issue when in reality, it really isn't. It's common sense versus insanity. And so fortunately, the Democrats, they don't get to crow about being for common sense when all you have on the other side is insanity. So you don't get any credit for that. I'm not going to give you any credit. That said, he's going to try and take it. Oh man, isn't he? They wrote, in his office in a recent afternoon, Mr. Manchin was feeling energized. He paged through a proposal he was developing for a new coronavirus relief deal and said he was imagining a more moderate course for Congress. Quote, I think we have a golden opportunity to bring the country back together and for us to work in the middle, said Mr. Manchin excitedly. Oh my God. A little reminder here about Manchin's COVID bill that he had signed on to. He's the only the Democrat that has put his name publicly on this piece of legislation. The rest is just Republicans. Suzanne Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney, right? So, and by the way, they're almost exactly the same when it comes to policy positions. But this COVID bill, it's about $908 billion. It gives $45 billion in bailouts to the airlines. No stimulus checks, $300 a week in additional unemployment benefits. The lion's share of the bill goes to corporations, and that's it. It's a terrible deal. It's awful. This guy's excited about this. He's like, yeah, centrism. Woo! Okay. This is exactly, by the way, what you can expect for the next 4 years. This kind of corporate welfare mixed with austerity. But like we knew this when we said, look, when we lost the primary, when progressives lost, when Bernie Sanders was out, okay, and Joe Biden became the nominee, we knew that this is what we were in for the next 4 years. It's unfortunate, but true. And so here we are. It's going to be a disaster. But back to Manchin. Like other corporate Democrats, they're pushing the idea that it's the far left of the Democratic Party that is the real problem. They're the ones that failed to win majorities in Congress. Those are the ones that you can't work with. And here's what he said. I'll tell you the reason why the numbers are so close with what the Democratic House members lost. For Nancy Pelosi, she's going to have to work with people that have a more moderate view than some of the people who pushed her from the left. Okay, well, here's the thing. You know, the people who lost seats in this election mostly were centrists. DSA-backed candidates, they won a majority of their races. The Squad won re-election easily, and they expanded their numbers. And they did do it by running on centrism. No, they did it running on the Green New Deal. Ed Markey, for example. Ed Markey ran in the Green New Deal. AOC, Jamal Bowman, Medicare for All. These are really popular things, okay? And yet, unfortunately, we're in a situation where now centrists, yes, they lost seats in the House. They did not win seats in the Senate. The best we can hope for, is a 50-50 Senate. And that, of course, relies on Democrats winning in Georgia. And so, oh, great. And so now, this is the situation, by the way, that Joe Manchin loves. Because now you have to do bipartisanship. Now you have to do, you have to attract Republicans. And so now he's got a measure of power. And so that's what he wants. And here's what he said about bipartisanship. It behooves everybody to start working together. If they don't, it doesn't take many of us to say, guys, we've given all you a chance. We haven't done our job for the last 10 years, and we're going to start. But, okay, but what's your job? I mean, your job is supposed to serve your constituents, right? Well, you're not doing that. You're not giving people what they want when it comes to, for example, healthcare, when it comes to, environmental issues. Since Joe Manchin consistently sides with oil companies and coal companies. And so what do you actually do? Who are you serving? Well, if your constituents are corporations, for example, then yeah, you're absolutely serving them. And that's it. And that's the problem. But worse, people like Manchin always dismiss the left, okay, who actually have policy positions that are helpful to the American people. And what Democrats can use to win elections on. But in the article, it says, he's ready to do battle with the progressive left, whose ire he drew when in an interview this month with the Washington Examiner, he responded to a question about some liberals' calls to defund the police with, defund my butt. So the whole idea of taking some money from bloated police departments that is used on purchasing weapons, tactical weapons and gear that is surplus military, and instead of using that money to buy guns and tanks and Bearcats, instead putting it into things that, might actually solve the root of criminal behavior. Addiction, poverty, mental health. His response to this is, defund my butt. Love to. Very classy response. In response to this, by the way, AOC posted a photo on Twitter of her glaring at Mr. Manchin, which is always fun. And he responded to it by saying, I guess she put the dagger stare on me. I don't know the young lady. I really don't. Well, maybe you should talk to her. You might find out that she has actually pretty good ideas. But no, he says, I never met her. I'm understanding she's not that active with her bills or in committee. She's more active on Twitter than anything else. Oh, really? More active on Twitter, you say? Okay, well, challenge accepted. I'll look it up. In the most recent session, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sponsored or co-sponsored 553 pieces of legislation. Oh, well, it's okay. All right. So now, what about Joe Manchin? What has Joe Manchin done? Well, in the most recent session, and again, there's a difference between the House and the Senate, obviously, but Joe Manchin only sponsored or co-sponsored 423 bills. With each of them, that actually became a law. So it appears that she seems to have been a little bit more active, not just on Twitter, but also in doing her job. What have you done, Joe Manchin? And not only that, but she has also raised money for other Democrats. I would say that she kind of wins this a little bit. What a clown. Okay, but there's more. Lauren Hitt, who's a spokeswoman for AOC, said that she had submitted more amendments than 90% of other freshman Democrats, including those promoting fair housing and a tear gas ban that had passed the House and had missed fewer votes than Joe Manchin himself. The Congresswoman, she says, has earned a reputation as a tough, prepared member in committee hearings. And you've all seen the videos, of course, of her going and grilling certain people, whether it be, CEOs or members of the Trump administration. And so, the only explanation I would have for Joe Manchin not being as active, not only, not on Twitter or in his job, is that he's spending a lot of his time going and begging private donors for cash. Yeah. Now, he also said this: we're not going to defund the police. We're not for the Green New Deal. That's not going to happen. We're not for Medicare for all. We can't even pay for Medicare for some. Oh, really? Who's we? I mean, you're speaking as if you speak for Democrats, Joe Manchin, which I can assure you, you are not. In fact, a Yale University poll conducted back in October found that 64% of voters themselves, just both Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whatever, support a Green New Deal. Data for Progress reported that 77% of Biden primary voters, these are people that supported Joe Biden in the primary. We're not talking about Bernie Sanders, progressives, people who voted for Elizabeth Warren or Tulsi Gabbard, anybody like that. No. These are 77% of Biden voters, primary voters, who wanted to see Biden win the nomination and become president. 77% of them said that they are committed to moving the United States to 100% of renewable energy and creating 10 million good-paying jobs. That sounds a lot like the Green New Deal. I mean, again, I'm going to tell you, Ed Markey wasn't exactly the most progressive member, but he embraced the Green New Deal, and guess what? He ran on it, and he won. I'm just saying, the vast majority of Americans, Democrats especially, support Medicare for all. The only thing that gets mixed support is defund the police, because nobody knows what it means. They think, oh, you're going to take away police completely. No, that's not the whole point. The point is to actually, in places like New York and LA, where the police departments have way too much power and influence in the government and end up getting these massive, massive budgets, of which they're never going to really need, and just use it to get, surplus military equipment, as I mentioned before. I mean, there are small towns in the middle of the country that are getting tanks. What do they need those for? What do they need those for? They don't. They don't. And so defunding that and giving back into the community, that's the whole point of defund the police. So, look, overall, though, Joe Manchin's full of shit. Joe Manchin doesn't represent Democrats, and that's fairly obvious from his rhetoric. And by the way, we can absolutely pay for Medicare for all. You know why? Because it actually saves money over our current system in the long run. It saves money. It saves money. So this is according to all these different studies that have been done on this. Even conservative studies have shown, oh, right, turns out Medicare for all saves money. Even though we wanted to have the study to try to debunk that, we couldn't. We just couldn't. And so I hate this guy. I think it's pretty clear. He's also against ending the filibuster, which McConnell has abused all throughout Obama's term, in order to get absolutely nothing done. He said, I will not vote to end the filibuster because that would, quote unquote, break the Senate. Quote, if you've got to blow up the Senate to do the right thing, then we've got the wrong people in the Senate. Well, goddamn. Finally, he said something that I agree with. Yes, we do have the wrong people in the Senate, Joe. You're one of them. And Mitch McConnell and Ted Cruz and Chuck Schumer and a lot of these senators are just garbage. Absolute garbage. But look, the thing is, the filibuster is kind of the reason why the Senate's broken in the first place. I mean, this was never meant to be a tool of complete obstruction. In the old days, you actually had to get up and literally filibuster. Now, all you have to do is invoke cloture, and then everything's blocked, tabled, you go home. You don't have to sit there and do Mr. Smith Goes to Washington anymore. No, you can just do whatever. And, block this legislation, which is what Mitch McConnell has always done. It has been twisted and perverted into something that is, basically used as a way to stop any sort of progress. But it makes people like Joe Manchin very happy, because then you actually have to go and appeal to people like Joe Manchin. And that's where he gets his power. That's where he gets his influence. That's where he gets people kissing his ass, because they finally need him. The so-called centrist. And so, look, he's not really a centrist. As I said, he's a Republican. He pretends to be a Democrat so that he can come off as being, oh, I'm super bipartisan. But really, he's filling a niche. And he does not want that niche to go away. He loves this because, again, he gets to feel important, like the Blue Dog Democrats, like the problem solvers, like all those people. Okay? And unfortunately for us, they don't do anything useful. But they do give a lot of cover to Republicans, corporate Democrats, and that is one of the big problems as well. They're gonna run cover for Joe Biden, not embracing progressive, embracing the progressive agenda. Look, I know we're gonna try to push left on him. It's not gonna happen. He's not gonna do anything because of people like Joe, and that's the problem. Okay, and that's one of the big problems here. Why we're not going to have progressive policies. And Joe Manchin, of course, is going to be able to cheer because he's helped in kneecapping the progressive agenda. And yet, at the same time, he's going to be able to be praised for pushing out these horrible, crappy deals. I'm so tired of the mainstream press. I mean, they put these guys on a pedestal. Joe Manchin is not courageous for standing up against AOC and the left. No, courage is standing against the establishment. Against the powerful, not for it. I'm tired of the glowing articles. I'm tired of the praise for this bipartisanship that overwhelmingly ends up helping the wealthy and the powerful and the connected and large corporations. It is absolutely disgusting. And just, I'm tired of it. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.